This woman smiles in the photo, but the truth behind the portrait is dark. Dr. Marcus Thompson had been cataloguing Victorian-era photographs at the Chicago Historical Society for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for what he found in a dusty box marked Unclaimed Estate Photos, 1882. It was a Tuesday morning in March 2018 when he lifted a cardboard-mounted photograph from the collection and felt his breath catch. The image was a formal studio portrait typical of the era. A woman sat in an ornate chair, dressed in an elegant dark gown with lace at the collar, her blonde hair arranged fashionably. Her eyes were open, staring directly at the camera with an unsettling stillness, her lips shaped into a faint smile. Standing beside her, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder, was a well-dressed black man in his 30s, wearing a fine suit with a watch chain across his vest. At first glance, Marcus thought the photograph was merely unusual for its time. A white woman and a black man posed together in the 1880 was remarkable on its own, but something in the woman's expression drew him in. Her eyes, though open, seemed glazed. Her smile appeared fixed, unnatural. Her posture was too perfect, too still. Marcus had studied enough Victorian photography to recognize the truth. This was a postmortem portrait. Families of the period often photographed deceased loved ones for memory's sake, but typically with closed eyes, posed to appear peacefully asleep. This woman's eyes were wide open, staring straight ahead. Someone wanted her to appear alive. Turning the photograph over, Marcus read what was written in fading brown ink. Margaret and Samuel Thompson Studio, Chicago, April 14th, 1882. Beneath it, in smaller, shakier script, the only photograph, taken 3 hours after her passing. May God forgive us all. A chill ran through him. Under the lamp's glow, he studied Samuel's face, eyes rimmed red, jaw clenched tight, grief carved into every line. His hand on Margaret's shoulder trembled, captured as a slight blur. But it was Margaret's face that haunted him, her open eyes, the forced smile. In death, she had been positioned to look happy. Marcus drew a magnifying glass and examined her closely. The painted studio backdrop resembled a garden. Fresh white roses and lilies, flowers of mourning, were arranged beside her chair. Margaret's left hand rested in her lap, a simple gold ring on her finger. Samuel wore the same ring. Husband and wife. He spent 3 days researching Thompson Studio. Operated by Albert Thompson from 1875 to 1889, it produced both standard portraits and post-mortem images, serving a racially mixed clientele, rare for the time. Marcus located the studio ledger, pages lined with names and payments. There, under April 14th, 1882, Samuel Bennett, special memorial portrait. $5, paid in full. Note, client insists subject's eyes remain open. Unusual request honored. $5 was a week's wages. Samuel had paid dearly for this photograph, an act of love, desperation, or defiance. Still puzzled, Marcus searched the Chicago Tribune archives and found a small article dated April 16th, 1882. Woman dies in childbirth. Margaret Wilson, age 26, passed Friday during labor. Infant deceased. No family claimed the body. The woman was residing with a Negro man. The paper didn't acknowledge a marriage. It didn't even name Samuel, only a Negro man. Margaret was listed not as Bennett, but Wilson. Their union wasn't recognized. Marriage records confirmed the truth. Not in Illinois, where interracial marriage was illegal in 1882, but in the Massachusetts State Archives. Marriage license, September 3rd, 1879. Samuel Bennett, Negro, 27, laborer. Margaret Wilson, white, 23, seamstress, Boston, Massachusetts. They were married, just not in the state where they lived. In Illinois, law erased their marriage and their family. To the courts, they were nothing but an unlawful pairing. To the world, Samuel was merely a black man living with a white woman. To each other, They were husband and wife. Marcus traced Samuel through census records. In 1880, he appeared as a carpenter on Dearborn Street, the same location referenced in the obituary. City records showed Samuel working hard, building a business, carving out a life despite the barriers imposed on him. Then Marcus found the document that changed everything. Filed in Cook County Court, October 1879. A petition. Samuel Bennett requested legal recognition of his Massachusetts marriage license in Illinois. Written formally, but heavy with emotion. I, Samuel Bennett, a free man and citizen of these United States, hereby petition this court to recognize the lawful marriage contracted between myself and Margaret Wilson. We are husband and wife before God and under the law of Massachusetts. We seek only to live peacefully as a married couple in this city. The petition was denied. The judge's ruling was brief and cold. Marriage between Negro and white persons is prohibited under Illinois law. The petition is denied. The alleged marriage contracted in Massachusetts has no legal standing in this jurisdiction. Marcus found another document from 1880. Samuel had tried again, this time with an attorney, arguing that the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution required Illinois to recognize a valid Massachusetts marriage. Again, denied. Samuel had fought for 2 years to have his marriage recognized. He had spent money he likely did not have on lawyers and court fees. He had risked his safety, a black man publicly demanding his rights in 1880 Chicago, insisting that a white woman was his legal wife. And he had failed. In the eyes of Illinois law, Margaret was not his wife. Their love, their ceremony in Boston, none of it mattered. Still, they lived together, choosing love over legality, danger over separation. Samuel worked as a carpenter. Margaret took in sewing. Together they built a quiet life in a city that refused to acknowledge their marriage. Then, in April 1882, Margaret went into labor. Something went wrong. Childbirth was always perilous in this era, but especially for those without reliable medical care. Did Samuel call a doctor? Would a doctor even come for a white woman living with a black man? The old newspaper article offered nothing more. Margaret died. Their child died with her, and Samuel was left in a grief the law refused to recognize. Officially, he had lost nothing, not a wife, not a child, just a white woman he was living with. Marcus needed to understand why Albert Thompson, the photographer, had agreed to take such a dangerous photograph. In 1882, Chicago, a postmortem portrait of a deceased white woman beside a black man was not only controversial, it could incite violence. Thompson had risked his business, his reputation, even his life. Searching deeper into archives, Marcus discovered that Albert Thompson had once been a Union Army photographer during the Civil War. He had documented battlefields, soldiers, freed slaves. After the war, he moved to Chicago and opened his studio. Among his personal papers, Marcus found a journal entry dated April 14, 1882. A colored man came today with a request that troubled me greatly. His wife, though he cannot call her that legally, died last night in childbirth. He wished for a photograph of them together, one photograph where they could exist as husband and wife. He showed me their marriage certificate from Massachusetts. Legal there, meaningless here. He wept as he spoke. They had never before dared to be photographed together. Too dangerous. He brought her body himself, wrapped in clean linens. We positioned her in the chair. He insisted her eyes remain open. He could not bear to see her look asleep. He wanted her looking at him just once more. I have photographed many dead. Never have I seen such sorrow as when he tried to coax a smile onto her face, whispering that he loved her, begging her forgiveness. When it was finished, he paid me $5 and carried her home. I do not know where she was buried or if she was given a grave at all, but I know this: I witnessed love today. Love that defied law, hate, and death itself. Marcus sat frozen. This was not just a postmortem photograph. It was evidence, proof of a marriage the world refused to see. Samuel had carried his dead wife through city streets to claim, in one captured moment, what the law denied him. Margaret had been reduced to a line in an obituary. Margaret Wilson, aged 26, died. Marcus needed more. Who was she before tragedy and erasure? He searched census records. Margaret Wilson was born in 1856 in Springfield, Illinois, to Irish immigrant parents. Her father, Thomas Wilson, worked on the railroads. Her mother, Catherine, died when Margaret was 16. By 1880, Margaret was no longer living at home. Marcus traced her to Chicago, listed as a seamstress in a respectable women's boarding house. Then he found a letter. It came from the archives of the Chicago Women's Trade Union and had been preserved because her sister later donated it. An intimate fragment of a life almost lost. August 1879. Dearest Emma, I must tell you something that will shock you, but please understand. I have met someone. His name is Samuel. He is kind and gentle and works as a carpenter. He is also a Negro. I know what people will say. Father would be furious. But Emma, he treats me with such respect. We walk together and talk for hours about everything, books, politics, our dreams. He wants to marry me, and I want to marry him. We are traveling to Boston next week, where our marriage will be legal. I do not know what will come of it. I know we will face hatred, but I love him, and he loves me, and that must count for something. Please do not tell Father yet. I will write to him when I can. Perhaps he will understand. Perhaps he will not, but I must follow my heart. Your loving sister, Margaret. There were no letters to her father afterward. Thomas Wilson died in 1885, 3 years after Margaret. His obituary listed his surviving children, Emma and 2 sons, but made no mention of Margaret. She had been erased from the family record. Marcus searched for Emma and found her in the 1900 census, married with children of her own. A Chicago newspaper from 1901 contained a small notice about a women's suffrage meeting where Emma Wilson Harris had spoken about her sister Margaret, who had died tragically young and whose marriage was not recognized by unjust laws. Emma had kept her sister's letters. Emma had tried in her own way to ensure Margaret's story wasn't completely forgotten. As Marcus continued his research, he discovered that Samuel and Margaret hadn't been alone. There was a small hidden community of interracial couples in 1880 Chicago, people who lived quietly, carefully, always aware of the danger surrounding them. He found evidence of this community in surprising places. Church records from a small Presbyterian church on the south side listed several ceremonies for interracial couples, though the minister noted that these were spiritual unions only, since Illinois did not recognize such marriages legally. Property records showed a handful of homes owned by black men where white women also resided, rarely listed as wives, sometimes as housekeepers or boarders, thin disguises that fooled no one but offered a sliver of legal protection. Newspaper archives revealed the violence these couples endured. An article from 1881 described an attack on a home where a black man and white woman lived together. A mob shattered the windows and threatened to burn the house. Police arrested the couple for lewd cohabitation rather than protecting them. A coroner's inquest from 1883 investigated the death of a white woman named Catherine Moore, found beaten in an alley. The inquiry revealed she had been married to a black man, James Moore, in Ohio, where the union was legal. After moving to Chicago, they were harassed relentlessly. Catherine's family had disowned her. Witnesses saw white men following her the night she died. No one was ever charged. Marcus found a memoir published in 1920 by a Chicago minister who had worked in the South Side during the 1880. He wrote, "There existed in those days a number of couples legally married in other states who found themselves unrecognized and persecuted in Illinois. They lived in constant fear, not only of legal punishment, but of violence from neighbors who viewed their marriages as crimes. Many lost everything: families who cast them out, jobs they could not keep, homes from which they were driven. Some disappeared entirely, and one suspects the worst. The courage it took to remain together under such conditions was extraordinary. These were love stories forged in the face of hatred. Samuel and Margaret had been part of this hidden network. They found each other, married legally where they could, and tried to build a life in a place that denied their humanity. They lived, knowing any day might bring violence, knowing Margaret's family might never speak to her again, knowing Samuel could be arrested on fabricated charges without warning. Yet still, they remained. For 3 years they built a home, hoped for a future, conceived a child. Then, in one terrible night, everything ended. Marcus realized that he still didn't know what happened after the photograph was taken. Where was Margaret buried? What became of Samuel? He searched cemetery records across Chicago, looking for Margaret Wilson or Margaret Bennett, buried in April of 1882. He finally found her in the records of Oakwood Cemetery, a large ground on the south side. The entry was stark: Margaret Wilson, died April 13th, 1882, age 26, cause childbirth, buried April 16th, 1882, Section 12, Lot 847, burial paid by S. Bennett. Section 12 was Potter's Field, the area for paupers, prisoners, and those with no family to claim them. Unmarked graves, bodies buried together. Margaret rested there without a stone, her name preserved only in a ledger. But Samuel had paid for her burial. Marcus located the receipt in the cemetery's financial files. $3, all Samuel could afford, but proof that he ensured she was laid to rest with dignity. Marcus visited Oakwood Cemetery on a cold April morning, nearly 136 years after her burial. Section 12 stretched before him, a plain field of grass marked only by a few weathered boundary stones. No individual markers. Hundreds lay beneath that earth, unnamed, unremembered. Margaret among them. She had been just 26. She had loved Samuel. She had chosen marriage despite knowing its cost. She carried their child. She died bringing that child into a world that would have rejected it as harshly as it rejected their union. And Samuel had carried her body to a photographer's studio to create one image, one piece of proof that their love existed, that she was his wife, that their story was real. He lifted his phone and photographed the grass, an unmarked field, anonymous, yet no longer unknown. Margaret was there, and now her story would be told. Back at the Historical Society, Marcus searched for Samuel's trail. After Margaret's death, did he stay in Chicago? Did he survive? Records showed the workshop sold in August 1882, 4 months after Margaret's burial, for a fraction of its value. Then Samuel vanished from Chicago entirely. Marcus widened his search. If Samuel left the city, where did he go? Census records offered an answer. In 1890, 8 years after Margaret's death, a listing appeared. Samuel Bennett, black, age 38, carpenter, living in Detroit, Michigan. A boarding house, unmarried, working in a furniture factory. More records followed. A Detroit directory from 1895 listed him as the owner of a small carpentry shop on Gratiot Avenue. Slowly, carefully, he built a new life. Then Marcus found something remarkable, a letter in the papers of a Detroit church. Dated 1896, written by Samuel, requesting membership at the Second Baptist Church. In it, Samuel told part of his story. Reverend, I come seeking a spiritual home. I have been alone for many years. I was married once, lawfully before God in Massachusetts in 1879. My wife was Margaret. She was a good woman, a Christian woman. We were happy, though the world made our happiness difficult. She died in Chicago in 1882, along with our unborn child. I have carried the grief of that loss every day since. I left Chicago because I could not bear to remain in the place where we tried to build our life. I live quietly here, working, attending services when I can. But I have not been part of a community. I wish to belong again. I ask not for pity, only for a place to worship and to serve. Your servant in Christ, Samuel Bennett." Beneath it, the pastor wrote, "Mr. Bennett was welcomed into our congregation on Easter Sunday, 1896. A man of deep faith and quiet dignity. Samuel's name continued to appear in church records for the next 15 years. He attended services regularly. He taught carpentry skills to young men in the church's vocational program. He donated what he could to the charity fund and became a respected member of the community. In 1911, the church newsletter printed a brief announcement. "We mourn the passing of our brother Samuel Bennett, who died peacefully on March 12th at the age of 59. Brother Bennett was a faithful member of our congregation for 15 years and will be remembered for his kindness, his skill, and his generous spirit. He is survived by no immediate family, but he was family to us all." Samuel was buried in Detroit's Elmwood Cemetery, in a section reserved for members of Second Baptist Church. His grave was marked simply, "Samuel Bennett, 1852–1911. Beloved brother in Christ Marcus traveled to Detroit. Standing over Samuel's modest headstone, he felt the story close in around him. Samuel had found belonging here. He had been remembered, mourned, and laid to rest with dignity. But he had never remarried. He had carried Margaret with him for 29 years, the only woman he ever called his wife. Marcus brought a copy of the photograph and placed it gently against the stone. Then he photographed the scene. The image of Samuel and Margaret reunited across time, memory folding back upon itself. Returning to Chicago, he prepared to publish his findings. The year was 2018, a time when conversations about race, love, and justice were once again at the forefront. Marcus wanted the story to reach beyond the academic world. He wanted people to see who Margaret and Samuel truly were, and what love had cost them. He contacted a journalist at the Chicago Tribune, Patricia Chen, the same newspaper that once reduced Margaret to 3 forgotten obituary lines. Patricia came to the Historical Society, studied the photograph, and read through every page of evidence. "She's looking right at us," Patricia whispered. "Her eyes are open." "Samuel insisted on it," Marcus replied. The photographer wrote that he couldn't bear to pose her as if she were asleep. He needed her to be looking at him, one last time. Patricia turned the photograph over and read the inscription. The only photograph. Taken 3 hours after her passing. "May God forgive us all." Within days she was deep into the story, interviewing Marcus, visiting both cemeteries, even locating descendants of Margaret's sister Emma. When Emma's great-granddaughter Rachel saw the picture, she wept. "We always knew there was another sister," she said, "but we never knew her name. We never knew she chose love, even when her family rejected it." The Tribune published Patricia's article on February 14, 2019, Valentine's Day, under the title, "The Only Photograph, A Love Story, Illinois Refused to Recognize." The article spread like wildfire. The public was captivated, not only by the image of Margaret's still body and Samuel's grief-stricken eyes, but by what the photograph represented. A marriage erased by law, a love criminalized by society, a husband determined to leave proof that she was his wife. The photograph became a symbol. Museums requested to display it. Teachers used it in classrooms. A playwright wrote a stage production. People began talking about anti-miscegenation laws, about the couples erased by them, about the cost of loving someone the world forbade you to love. With the help of the Historical Society, a memorial stone was placed in Oakwood Cemetery, where Margaret lay among unmarked graves. Margaret Wilson Bennett, 1856–1882, beloved wife of Samuel Bennett, married legally in Massachusetts, September 3, 1879. Their love transcended unjust laws. Second Baptist Church in Detroit added a companion plaque near Samuel's grave. Samuel Bennett, 1852–1911, husband of Margaret Wilson Bennett. He loved faithfully, lived with dignity, and never forgot. The photograph now hangs in the Chicago Historical Society, no longer hidden, no longer silent. Visitors stand before it and read the truth. A man and woman who married in Boston, lived in Chicago, died apart, yet loved beyond death and beyond law. Marcus visits often. He studies Margaret's open eyes, Samuel's hand resting gently on her shoulder, the matching rings that defied the world around them. He thinks of the courage it took to love when love was illegal, of the laws meant to crush them, and of the single image Samuel risked everything to preserve. A simple Victorian portrait, at first glance nothing more. But behind it lies a history of devotion, loss, and defiance. A woman who chose love over acceptance, a man who mourned her for the rest of his life, a marriage erased by the state but immortalized by a photograph that should never have existed, yet did. And now, after 137 years, the truth endures. She was loved. He never forgot, and the law could not destroy what they built together.